Welcome to the Organic Farmers Association Collective Farmer Circle. Today, the discussion will be on getting ready for your organic inspection. It's can be kind of, especially if it's the first time, but even if it's been many times, your operation relies on that organic certification. And so you want to make sure you get through it. And nobody likes to be stressed out. So this is to try to help you have less stress so you understand what's going to be looked at and you're somewhat prepared ahead of time and not running around the house looking for that receipt or whatever. So I am Harriet Behar. I'm farmer technical services consultant with the Organic Farmers Association. Next slide. And so we're just going to give a little overview. What is the Organic Farming Association? Lessening that anxiety through good preparation, and then kind of organizing your paperwork. And kind of why they want to look at it, and then we'll have a little discussion. Next slide. So who is the Organic Farmers Association? Who is OFA, right? We're going to talk a lot in acronyms. Next slide. So we are farmers. We are the only organization of organic farmers nationwide in the United States, and we participate at a national level and at state levels and local levels, providing advocacy and education about organic farming to farmers, and we speak for farmers. So we're at the table when they are changing rules or developing new rules or implementing rules that we feel are problematic. We are the farmer voice. Next slide. If you are interested in participating more, we have these work groups where we talk about organic imports and the effect that's been having on the organic marketplace here. We have a very successful organic crop insurance group, and it's open to, you don't have to be a member. Any organic farmer in the United States can join, where we have actually had some very positive impact on having crop insurance be more effective for organic farmers, because organic farming is different than conventional farming. The NOSB is the National Organic Standards Board, which reviews new materials and new regulations, as well as reviews the current ones and changes them. So we give input there. And then also with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, we have been working with them so that their programs are, again, more useful for organic farmers. Next slide. So, how do you lessen anxiety during your inspection? Well, the answer to that is good preparation. And this is probably the least favorite thing that organic farmers do, is keep their paperwork. But I was an organic inspector. I don't do inspections anymore, but for over 35 years. I've been on thousands of organic farms, and my own farm has been certified organic since 1989. And I can tell you that the paperwork, really the most effective and lucrative operations that I was on were the ones that had good documentation, especially of their activities, what seed they grew where, when they planted it, what fertility inputs they used, what pest control inputs they used, and then they kept track of how effective they were. And so they then, the next year when they're making decisions, they'd be like, you know what? This is the best variety. I'm going to grow this variety. Or they could see on my lighter ground where it's sandier, this variety does better, and this other variety does better on my heavier clay soils. And so they were, over time, those records while useful for the organic inspector, are really the management tool that is probably the most important management tool for organic farmers because we don't rely so much on inputs. We rely on management and observations. So next slide. Maybe, Carmer, you can go back on mute because there's some background noise there. So one thing that the organic inspector is going to do, and this is somewhat is not necessarily a new requirement, but it has been put into the regulation. Before it was done, but it wasn't part of the regulation. And this is they have to be able to track from seed to sale or backwards from sale to seed. So when it was harvested, when it was stored, where it was stored, um, what happened to it when it was growing and what field was it in and what seed was used to grow it. And this is really a promise that we make to the organic consumer that this tracking is available. And if you're a vegetable grower, you are also subject to the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is a food safety regulation, and the organic farmers already had everything. So it was a lot of conventional vegetable growers had to kind of kind of almost emulate what organic farmers were doing with their organic paperwork. So, proof of your seed purchases, and you can have your seed packets. You could have the packing lists or the invoices that showed what you purchased. You can have like the seed catalogs where you bought them from. So then if someone wanted to track was that a GMO? And then you look, oh, I bought this seed from High Mowing Seed or Fedco Seed or Johnny's Seed or Seed Savers or Territorial. There are many seed companies that write on their first page say, we do not carry any genetically modified seeds. So then everything that you bought from them is guaranteed to not be genetically modified. So you've taken care of that requirement by buying from those seed suppliers. And of course, your invoices would show that, and then having the catalogs there to show. And of course, many of them also sell organic seed, and I'll get to that. Keeping some kind of planting records. What did you plant where? And when. The timing is very important too. Did you use any kind of raw manure on the field before you planted? And because if it's food for human consumption, there's a 120-day or 90-day waiting period between the use of the manure and the harvest of the crop, and that has to do with whether or not the edible portion is in contact with soil particles. So something like sweet corn would be a 90-day between the manure and the harvest because it's in a husk, so that the edible portion is not in contact with the soil. But if it's, let's say, beets, obviously it's growing in the soil, so that would need the 120 days. And that's actually what is also in the Food Safety Modernization Act. They just followed the organic rule. So keeping track of those dates, so that could be verified by the organic inspector. And the reason for that is that is the time needed so the pathogens in that manure would no longer be active. And of course, none of us want to sell food to people who would then get sick. Any kind of the pest control or disease management inputs that you might have used, you keep track of it all. And of course, having some kind of map, right? So you got field 1, field 2. I inspected people who named their fields after the constellations or woodland wildflowers. It doesn't matter, as long as each field has an individual name and a boundary. And keeping track of all those dates. I know that it was very useful for people to know how late can I plant my onion plants and still get a sizable onion, or how late can I plant sweet corn and still get sellable sweet corn because, actually that late sweet corn gets a little bit higher price in the market. So knowing those dates is really important. And then keeping track of your harvests. And if you keep things in storage, so especially if you're like a commodity crop grower growing corn and soybeans, you might be blending fields in one bin. So keeping those storage records that show that, and then sales records. Um, they can be written or electronic as long as they are easily auditable, meaning that the inspector can see them. Now, I inspected many people who said, I have those records in my head. And I said that I am not like Mr. Spock from Star Trek. I can't put my hand on your head and do a mind meld and be able to see what your records are. So those records have to be easily auditable. That's a quote from the regulation. So you have to write them down somewhere, but it can be on a computer and then show those records to the inspector when they're there. I know a lot of people, especially like community supported agriculture farms where they're doing lots of different things. They have like a big whiteboard in the shed where they keep track. We harvested 8 tubs of zucchini and, 5 tubs of green beans, and they have that whole harvest record. And then the farmer just takes a picture and the date's up there. And then they have a whole set of files of the photographs. So you don't have to write it down again. If you can take a photograph of it, if it's on a big whiteboard, just don't wipe it down before somebody's taken the picture. Next slide. So you're going to have the basics are going to be like your farmstead map, your field map, your field histories. Now, you have already submitted all these when you submitted your application, which is also known as the organic system plan. So everything in bold, you've already done. So it's not like you're going to have anything extra. It's already there. The inspector already has access to it. You don't even have to show it to them. Be nice to have that field map with you so you can take the field map out when you're looking at the fields with the inspector. But the field activity log and the harvest records and the storage records and the sales records, you do not submit those to the certifier when you put in your application. So those are the things that you'll be showing the inspector and need to have available when they're there. Next slide. So when the inspector is there, so you already know that you look at your organic system plan, look at your application, see what you said you were doing. Are there any changes? That's going to be pretty much the first question. If you said you were growing, this was going to be your sweet corn field over here, you ended up putting it in squash, they'll have to just update it so that the actual record is current. Of course, you gave in your application sometime between January and March, so you didn't necessarily have your fields ready at that point, and things could have changed. So make sure you have your updates. Look that over. If you are planning on adding a new pest control material or a new fertility material or disease control, you really need to make sure you get in touch with the certifier and get it in your organic system plan and have their approval before you use it. They do not like to be surprised. So the other thing is what's really nice about having the map and going over the map with your inspector before you go out and look at the fields is it shows where you might have a buffer zone. And the rule is if there's conventional farming where they're spraying across over the fence next to you, you need to have a buffer zone where you do not harvest organic crops from that area. That guarantees that there has not been drift. And of course, the size depends on if there's trees there, That's going to kind of stop those droplets from coming across. So your buffer zone could maybe be 15 feet if it's solid trees. But if it's bare ground and just open for wind, you might need 30 feet or 40 feet. If it's above ground and it looks like if the conventional end is higher than you might have to have a larger buffer zone if the risk of runoff from conventional fertilizer is greater. So this is kind of an agreement between the farmer and the certifier, with the inspector providing the information on what they saw as far as what are the risks. And that's the other thing too, is the inspector does not make any decisions. They just report what they see, and they are there to verify your application. So go over your application and see if there's any changes again when the inspector comes. And then you can see, you can even write these things on your map to make it easier for them to understand where's conventional cropland, where are the buffer zones. Next slide. So if you do have buffer zones, but let's say it's in a conservation reserve program, or it's a pasture that the farmer says, I never spray. Well, then you won't need a buffer zone. But if that person is not certified organic, then many of the certifiers provide this type of documentation that you can get from your neighbor. It should be done every year because things change year to year, and then you won't need a buffer zone. The inspector will still look and make sure there's no spray, from what they could tell. But the neighbor, it doesn't have to be notarized, but you kind of write down what are the fields that you're talking about, and then you'll have this verification of adjoining land use. Next slide. If you did have to harvest a buffer, let's say you grew something in that buffer zone and it was the same crop, that was the organic crop, then you cannot sell that as organic. And so you're going to document that you harvested it separately, that you cleaned your equipment between the harvest of what's considered non-organic, and then where you stored it and sold it as a non-organic crop. And again, this is from the National Center for Ag Alternative, NCAT, I'm not even sure. ATRA is Appropriate Technology Transfer for Rural Areas. I know that one. The ATRA project right there, they have kind of a form you can use, but as long as you have where it was harvested, when it was harvested, how much, and where you sold it, you don't have to use this form, but it's useful. Next slide. The other thing that's in your organic system plan is that 3-year field history. And a lot of certifiers have similar things to this where you actually have everything there. It's got the field number, how many acres, did you rent or own it? Is it organic? Is it in transitional? Or are you doing some fields that conventional? What crop did you use? What seed variety did you use? And then all your inputs, and then the dates and rates. So you wouldn't even have to keep a field activity log if you wanted to keep it on this 3-year field history. But it's nice to have the activity log so you can write down your own information, like how well it did, if you're growing corn, did it canopy early, did it seem to put up with high winds, whatever it is. And so you have to give them a 3-year field summary when you first start in organic, and then every year thereafter you give them a current plan, so that the certifier has this, and this is already something that you've given them. So next slide, excuse me. There are some issues with manure. So if you're buying or getting given a gift of off-farm manure or bedding for your livestock, you need to have them sign this because we want to make sure that they didn't spray the manure piles for flies. Sometimes if it came out of a manure pit, they might be adding something to the manure pit to lower odor. And those are synthetics, and those would not be allowed in manure used on organic land. No treated sawdust is allowed. Um, and if you're buying and bedding for livestock, that could be eaten. So sawdust they wouldn't eat, but they could eat corn stalks or hay or straw. That bedding would have to be certified organic. So this form again, I'm just using MOSA because that's who's my certifier, but most of the certifiers have all of these kind of forms available. But these, I'm kind of going over these because these are things that you would not have in the application, so you could have that ready. So when they say, "Oh, you got manure from off the farm, do you have any documentation?" You just whip it out and say, "I'm ready for you." Next slide. Uh, Same with pest management. Again, never use anything without approval from the certifier beforehand. If better yet, if you can even have like the OMRI seal on the pest control. I use sometimes some safer soap for aphids in my greenhouse. I get an OMRI approved product, but it's also always on my input list that I have with the certifier. So that has to be part of your organic system plan. And of course, they'll want to see the containers to make sure that the container matches what you have listed. Next slide. So this is kind of what they give you to fill out. And that's usually part of your organic system plan. So you should be looking at that before your inspection, making sure that everything that you're currently using is there. And it's not a bad idea to kind of gather things up in one place. So when the inspector wants to see the containers, you can just go there and they can just check them off. Don't you feel so much less stress that you're so prepared? Next slide. For seeds, they're going to want to know what seeds you use. Now, you can use your invoices, your packing lists. It's a lot easier than having them go through lots of different packets. I know on my farm, I have like over 800 packets of seed because I have more than 1 year's worth I'm using up. And uh, we don't want to be going through all my seed packets. That's kind of a waste of time, especially since I have all my invoices and my packing lists, which showed exactly what arrived on the farm and when and who sold them to me and whether they were treated or not. Um, and then of course, too, like I said, the seed catalogs will say if they've been genetically modified or not. They'll say if that seed was treated or not. And that all actually is always on the invoice as well. Um, so best though, and then you're supposed to search for organic seed. Just a plug here, organic seed is grown by organic seed breeders who breed in characteristics that we need under organic systems. So I know that organic seed costs a little bit more, but in the end, it really does help you. And I know as a grower since 1989, there's these seed varieties that are organic that I find to really fit with the way that I grow, as compared to the non-organic seed varieties are grown for conventional systems. So the rule says you have to buy organic seed and use organic seed unless you cannot find non-organic seed in the quantity, quality, or variety that you want. So for the non-organic seed you're using, again, you can kind of just show your catalogs and say, here's, I was unable to get, I'm trying to think of something, uh, my curly kale, in the variety I wanted, from in organic seed. So if you have all the catalogs there, and of course, if you're buying already from places that do provide organic seed, that shows that you are at least trying to follow the rule. Next slide. The other thing is if you do buy organic seed, you should verify that that company is actually certified organic. And this will only take you less than 5 minutes. You can go on the Organic Integrity Database, which is run by the National Organic Program, and then you can put in the name of the operation where it says there on the top, and put in Johnny Seeds or Seed Savers Exchange or High Mowing Seeds, and it would come up and show that they were certified. Be careful if you buy organic seed on Amazon. I have found many times when those operations are not certified and that organic seed is not actually organic. So be careful. And you can look for them on the Organic Integrity Database. I know that the National Organic Program has gotten some complaints and has been trying to work with Amazon, so they kind of have that verification built into theirs before they let people sell things labeled as organic. Next slide. So this would be like a field activity log. There's many ways of doing it. The one on the far right actually is 3 years worth of activities on one piece of paper per field. So you could do it that way. You can also do it like in a notebook, which is what I do. So because I like sometimes to be able to take the notebook out and take notes of what's doing well. I grow bedding plants and then I try new varieties and I keep track of, this was the first one to, have a red tomato, or, this cucumber produced the whole season, or whatever it might be. And then I just go by the year. And I just take notes. I'm in field one, and this is what I was growing, and of course, when I'm doing my transplanting, if I'm using any pest control materials, if I do side dressing with, heated manures, whatever it is, it all goes in the book. And of course, it's a wonderful record for me in subsequent years, and I go back and look when I'm buying seed, which seed was that did so well. I have it all written down. I know some farmers go just Sunday afternoon, that's their recreation. They walk their fields and take notes, and they have just a whole crop season's worth of information. Other people decide that they'll take little notes, or they'll go out and then put it on the computer. That's fine too. So there's many different ways of doing it. Whatever works for you. I know a lot of people just have a calendar, a regular calendar with big boxes that are blank, and they just write down what they've done that day on the calendar. Have a pen hanging there, make it easy. Have it by the front door. You walk in, you write it down. You're done. And then it's there. Okay, you can write your harvest records on there too. Next slide. Another kind of peripheral thing, if you like have electric lines through your property, or the road crews come through and they spray, you can have a no spray agreement. And so this is what I have, and they don't spray under my power lines that go through. Of course, I have an agreement that I'm going to keep it mowed, and I'm not going to have anything that's going to grow up into the lines, or no trees that could fall on the electric lines. I'll be a good co-op member and take care of it. But this will be something the inspector will look for. And of course, this is like kind of goes on forever. It doesn't end. So I have my no spray agreement. It's right there in a folder. I pulled it out. I had it ready. They say, "Oh, do you have a no spray agreement?" Yes, I do. Here you go. Next slide. If you are having, if you either harvest conventional on your own farm and then use it on organic, or you hire a neighbor who doesn't do only organic harvesting, like with their combine or whatever, you have to keep track of cleaning between the non-organic and the organic use. That would a lot of times, um, like tanks, like sprayer tanks, those poly tanks, you basically you can't use them. There's no way to clean them. If it's a metal tank, which like a backpack, sometimes there's backpack sprayers, those can be cleaned. You just have a clean down log. Again, your certifiers would have all kinds of things. And also, if somebody's coming and picking up, let's say, grain at your farm, if it's already like in cases, well, you wouldn't want it to, you want to make sure that when you are sending your organic produce of any type, grain, even livestock, somebody's coming, that there can't be non-organic bedding in there that your livestock could eat. Here you've grown that cow for 22 months, and on the way to the slaughter plant you lose certification. Don't let it happen. So this is, again, having some kind of cleaning documentation. It just reminds both you and the people who you're working with that you need everything clean. Next slide. If you use, like if you add calcium or potassium or phosphorus or any kind of soil amendment, not necessarily manure, but anything else, the rule says that you should be basing that on soil tests. So if you've added, you should have a soil test that at least is less than 3 years old, that you're basing those applications on. So have your soil tests ready. Next slide. If you are giving water to livestock or you wash vegetables, you'll need a yearly water test to show that it did not have any bacteria. It's also a good idea to do nitrates too if you can. So you might need that. Next slide. And then I think we're almost done here. The next would be if you are storing things, like this is a bin for soybeans. So so where did they come from? How many went in? How many came out? What load was it shipped out on? Again, this is something that the certifiers have, or you can just keep track of it. I know people who kind of have like a metal a magnet, and they have this bin record inside the bin door, and it's inside a like plastic sleeve, so it's like right there, right? They don't have to go back to the house to fill it out. They got a pen in this plastic sleeve, and it's got a magnet holding it there, and so when they are loading out of the bin or loading in of the bin, they can write it down. And then when you go look at the bin, you can show it to the inspector. Next slide. And then, of course, keeping track of your sales. So either have your invoices, keep a running list, whatever works for you. And of course, if you're shipping, there'll be a bill of lading. Remember to write the word organic when you're shipping things out. It's important to differentiate that you're not just selling soybeans, you're not just selling zucchini, you're selling organic zucchini. Next slide. So there are these input and output audits. So let's say you make a salsa that you sell at the farmer's market or to your CSA. And so you're maybe not you're not making the vinegar that went in the salsa. So you are going to have to buy organic vinegar. So you're going to have records of how much organic vinegar did you buy? How much did you use? Just think about, when you're getting ready to make the product, you know that you're going to need 2 gallons of vinegar for the amount of salsa you're planning to make that day, right? And you have all the peppers and tomatoes and garlic and onions there. but you don't have the salt or the vinegar. So think about your recipe and then for someone to their baby just track, just like you have to keep track that you have enough on hand to make it, then you're just keeping track of the records. So the inspector can verify a specific day that you made your salsa, that you had all materials on hand that you said you had in the recipe, and you just have those records. And of course, how much you made. Next slide. The other thing that they do is they also kind of make sure that you were able to grow enough to sell what you said you were going to sell. And so this is then based on your sales. Now, if you go to the farmer's market, um, you just have to keep track. You don't have to keep track every time you sell one pepper. Okay. But if you went to the market with 12 crates of peppers, and you don't have to count each pepper, you kind of have an idea that each crate holds about 25 peppers, somewhere in there, and bell peppers. And then you came home with 3. So you sold 23 crates. Good for you. That's all you got to do is just keep track of what you sold, what you went to the market with, which is a really good idea for planning. Because let's say you came home with 22 crates. Like you're obviously growing too many peppers. And you can plan for the next year. For quite a few years when I did farmers market, I liked growing zucchini, and I could never sell zucchini in the midsummer. But boy, did I sell a lot of early zucchini and a lot of late zucchini. So I didn't even bring zucchini in the middle of the summer. I didn't even grow midsummer zucchini. I only grew zucchini in the beginning and the end for what I learned. I mean, I grew a little bit, but I could see that in the early season and in the late season, that's when I learned that from my records. And so that's all you have. That's what you have to do. So that record is not just for the inspector, but it's very useful for you to plan what you need. Next slide. So if you're doing row crops or small grains, you just have to show that you had enough seed for all those acres. What kind of fertility inputs did you use? How did how many times did you cultivate? That kind of thing. And what was your yield? And what went into the bin? And of course, did you clean the combine if you needed to? There you go. I mean, it's all, and of course, if you fed it on farm, keeping track of how much you were feeding, on a monthly basis. You don't have to write down every time, you take a bale of hay and feed it to the calves. But maybe once a month, you're keeping track. I used 25 bales of hay out of the 1,000 that I grew or whatever. Next slide. And then the same with livestock. We keep track of livestock too. So if you are chickens, we keep track of broilers by the flock. So if you had, 800 broilers that were butchered in one day, you're keeping track, can you go back and show the inspector the day old chicks arrived and how many you got? So that would be the kind of audit chain for that. And that'll be the same for, let's say you're selling, 3 beef cows. Who were the mothers? Where, what were they fed? How long were they on the farm? Did they have any prohibited substance, used or not? Hopefully not, because you couldn't be selling those animals as organic. So you're just keeping track, a lot of ear tag numbers. Obviously, chickens don't have ears, so that's why they kept track of my flock. So that these are all kind of, if you just think about what you need to know, right? If you're in the business of selling chicken for meat, you're keeping track of how many chicks you get and how many final birds were slaughtered, right? Because how else are you going to know what to sell? So then you just keep track of that. and keep track periodically of uh, your inventories in the freezer. Next slide. Wow. What do you think? Yes, it seems like a lot of paperwork, but it all kind of makes sense. And most of it is really useful for you as the farmer, to kind of have a system. I know there were a lot of like different pieces of paper, but that only had to do like if the electric line is going over your land, or, um, they spray your roadside or whatever. But basically, everybody has seed invoices. You know, everybody's got some kind of field history, field map. It's really not that hard to keep track of. So let's open it up. We'll stop recording. And if anybody has any questions.